Good evening. It was a fun time this morning, actually this afternoon it was. At Bethesda, we were speaking about the time when God saved the Israelites. It's fun to talk about the wisdom and the power and the grace and the salvation of God. I love to sing His praises everywhere that I am. We have reached the chapter 6 of Genesis. We've already talked about when God created all that there is. And about His last creation, on the sixth day of creation, the thing that He had planned all along. The people that He loved before He had created them even. He knew them, and He had this plan. And so He had prepared everything, all this goodness that we see, all the beauty, all the deliciousness, and everything good, perfect. And then He placed the man and the woman in the garden. And He gave them jobs, and He said everything was perfect and good, but He told them that there is one thing that you may not eat, and that was from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. But then we find out that there were some other people that were watching. Actually, these were not humans. These were angels, spirit beings that God had created, many, many of them. And there was one especially that was very powerful and beautiful, and his name was Lucifer. And he was watching, and the other angels were singing God's praises and amazed at what he did. And he got jealous and proud. And he said, I want to be like the Most High God. I will sit enthroned over the heavens. And so he rebelled. And he took a bunch of the angels with him. And his name was changed to Satan, which means adversary or enemy. And that's what he became. He hated God, and he wanted to cause God pain, and so he wanted to ruin the relationship that God had with mankind, because he knew that that would cause pain. So what he did was he went to Eve, and he said, you will not really die. He tempted her. Oh, this fruit, it's beautiful, it's good, look at it. Now, if you eat of this fruit, then you will know what's good and evil. You'll be able to decide for yourselves what's good and evil. I'm changing the words a little bit, paraphrasing. But she took the fruit, the bait, and she ate. And she gave Adam, and he ate. And so then came the problems. From that time, first of all, there came shame and fear of God. They wanted to hide from God, and they tried also to hide what they had done. But God saw through it all. He knew everything that had happened. Also with Satan, when Satan rebelled against God, he knew what was happening, and he could not allow sin where he was. He's holy, he's righteous, he's clean. And he could not, as a righteous judge, allow that dirtiness, filth, to be around him. So he punished Satan. And he also punished Adam and Eve when they sinned. Excuse me. I'll put this somewhere else. So then he, after they had sinned, and he went to them and he said, what have you done? And And they tried to make excuses and blame others for what they had done. But God said, well, because of what you've done, therefore, you're going to be cursed. And you're going to die eventually. You'll be separated from me. You'll die. There'll be problems in your relationship. And you will have hard work for the rest of your lives until you die. And so then he had said that they were going to die if they ate of the fruit. And now there was this other tree in the middle that if they ate of it, then they wouldn't die. It was the tree of life. So God said, it's not good if the people are here because they could eat of that tree and not die. And so he made them leave. So they were sent out of the garden with an angel protecting, so that they could not enter it again. Now, after that, they were, the rest of their lives, living outside of the garden, having to work very hard, thorns growing up and everything. Remember, thorns are part of the curse. Thorns and hard work and death and growing old. And it was hard. Then Eve became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. And remember what happened. In the second generation already, what happened? Jealousy. The original sin of Satan, right? Jealousy. When the two sons, they went to offer things to God as thank offerings to God, and the one was accepted and the other was not. Cain's offering of fruit and vegetables was not accepted by God, and so he became jealous of his brother, whose offering of a lamb was accepted by God. And God said he saw that Cain's expression had changed. He was no longer happy, he was upset. And he knew what he was thinking. Cain, what's the problem? Cain didn't listen to God because God warned him. He said, if you continue on this route, sin is crouching at your door. It wants to defeat you. You must defeat it. You have a decision now, Cain. Continue on this route. Allow this little seed that's been planted in your mind to grow and sprout and grow fruit. And it will end badly. That's basically what he was saying. And Cain, he wasn't listening. He got angrier and angry until one day he killed his brother. And that was a very big problem. Because God went to Cain and he said, Cain, where's your brother? And he tried, like his father had done, tried to hide it, right? I don't know. How should I know? Am I my brother's keeper? He tried to hide it. And God said, what on earth are you thinking? Cain, I can see that blood soaking into the ground. Because of what you've done, now you're cursed. The ground is cursed because of you. And you have to live wandering far from mankind. Now, then it says, from there, Cain, he got married. The question was, who? Okay, apparently this was a sister. Because Adam and Eve did have daughters as well. Anyway, he got married and he had son and probably daughters, sons and daughters. And he lived far from God. Sin causes separation. The trouble is, Cain, he never repented of his sin. When God said, because of what you've done, the ground is cursed because of you, and you live far from people, he was now concerned about himself. Oh, that's so heavy, so hard. Tack into me. I mean, look at me. I'm so pitiful. Oh. Apparently he'd forgotten about what he'd done to his brother, right? The trouble is, now he is rejected by God because of his sin and his lack of repentance to God. He's rejected by God, and his brother is dead. Now, where is this offspring going to come from, through whom there would be a redeemer to save them from sin, from Satan? Where? Well, Adam and Eve had another son later. His name was Seth. And then in chapter 5, we learn about the offspring of Seth. When Seth became an adult, he also got married, and he had a son. He had a son, and his son's name was Enosh. And at that time, men began to call on the name of the Lord. So now, there's a story about Cain's descendants in chapter 4, and they were clever people. They were doing all kinds of clever things. They were making things out of bronze and iron and making musical instruments and everything like that. But it doesn't say anything about them paying any attention to God. But during the time of Enosh, people began to call on the name of the Lord. So then in chapter 5, we have, I'm not going to go through all the names. There are 10 different generations from the time of Adam until the time of Noah. And these people were living long lives. I will mention one along that line, and that was the great-great-grandson of Adam and Eve, whose name was Enoch. When Enoch had lived 65 years, he became the father of Methuselah. And after he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and then he was no more, because God took him away. In all the other accounts, all the other descendants of Adam, they all lived so many years, and then they died, right? But this one, he was no more. God took him. He didn't experience death. He walked with God. He had a close relationship with God. God wants that close relationship with us. Adam and Eve, they ruined the relationship through their unbelief, through their doubt of God's goodness. Cain ruined his relationship with God when he tried to hide what he'd done. God was compassionate. He gave him an opportunity to say, I'm sorry, God, I did this. Things got out of hand. I got so angry. No, he didn't do that. He tried to hide it. And even after God still was compassionate, protecting him from vengeance from other people, he was still unrepentant. So they ruined their relationships, but God still wanted that close relationship. He got that with Enoch. Then Enoch had a son, and his son's name was Methuselah, and Methuselah lived the longest of all of them. He lived 969 years. Can you imagine? No. In this, the way the world is right now, that is not even possible. But at this time, the climate, the world was a bit different. It said that it had not yet rained. There was a different climate at that time. Water was bubbling up from the earth. It was different. And from the archaeological and geological evidence that we see these days, it looked like things were growing to greater sizes, because it seemed like at that time the oxygen levels on the earth were a bit greater. So people were living longer. Also, there was the gene pool was not as messed up as it is these days. Closer to the beginning when it was better. So anyway, people were living for a long time. And then we come down to Noah. After Noah, the 10th generation. After Noah was 500 years old, he became the father of Shem, Ham, and Japheth. That's a pretty ripe age to start a family, huh? 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. When men began to increase, this is in chapter 6, increased in the number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them that they chose. Now, there's a lot of discussion about who those sons of God and daughters of men are. And also, even it has been translated in a little bit different ways depending on your take on it. One of them is that these might have been angels, and they were not supposed to leave their rightful place. They were supposed to, they weren't supposed to do this, and they did this, and it resulted in it was called Nephilim, these great people that some people would call, one translation of Nephilim might be giants. It basically means big people, big in strength perhaps, or big in size, or it could be just mean great as in famous people. Anyway, then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with them. Another idea about who these sons of God were, and that I have often spoken in this way, is that the sons of God might have been the other line. In other words, the line of Seth. The ones that were following God, that were giving God praise and worshiping Him, they mixed with the other line, the line of Cain, who were very, they were not listening to God. And so it became a mixture. And as we often see, if I have a basket of fruit and one, say an apple, if I have a basket of apples and one goes bad, what happens to the rest of them? Pretty soon the whole batch is bad. So whatever the case is, this is what we see. Then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with man forever, for he is mortal. His days will be 120 years. So God is giving a warning here. 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth. That is, it could be translated as great men or giants. In those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. The Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals, creatures that move along the ground, and birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. Why? What was different about Noah? And isn't it sad? Adam and Eve, perfect circumstances, nothing to complain about. With sin, their own son, their firstborn, is already a murderer. And from them it continues to increase. In chapter 4, we learn that one of their descendants of Cain, he murdered somebody, and he was actually bragging about it. And it continues to go on until we find that everything, it was all bad, all their inclinations of their heart, everything, all the time, totally rotten. Throw it all out. So he says, I will wipe mankind, whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals, creatures that move along the ground, the birds of the air, for I am grieved that I made them. Why? It hurt God When Adam sinned, Satan's plan to hurt God succeeded. It hurt. Adam was called the Son of God because God had made him. He had no physical father. When your child, if you are married, you know that if your child becomes estranged from you, you know that that hurts. And God was grieved. It hurt God to see how people were hurting one another, how they were separated from Him. Sin hurts God. He hates to see the hurt that it causes on other people. He hates to see that separation. Because He loves us, He hates to see that sin that separates, that ruins relationships, that separates people. If you've seen divorce, you know. Children, grandchildren, for several generations, it hurts. It destroys. This is the account of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. That is, he had a relationship with God. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, I am going to put an end to all people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I am surely going to destroy both them and the earth. So make for yourself an ark of, it says cypress wood. They're not actually sure. In one translation it says gopher. We're not actually sure exactly what kind of wood this was. And they were to make it, and he told them about how big. About 150 meters long, 25 meters wide, and 15 meters high. This is a ship. And it's supposed to have 3 levels. And at the top, you're supposed to have ventilation, windows around the top. And so he made it exactly. And then we're supposed to put tar on the outside. I've been out in the jungle where they've dug out canoes, and they put tar or bitumen, something from the plants, sap that comes out, and they put that between the cracks, and so it would be waterproof. I don't think that Noah had much experience in shipbuilding, because there wasn't really, it seems like he was building on a dry land. So God told him exactly how to make it. And then he was to load on the ship a lot of food for himself and for animals. And he must have known about how long they were going to be on the ship, because they had enough food for the whole time that the ship was going to be floating. Now, there hadn't been any rain, remember? So he did this, and it took a very long time, and it says in other passages that all during this time, he was warning people. He said, this is what God has said, repent. This is what God's going to do. And what did the people do? They ignored him. And they laughed at him. Crazy man. They were laughing. They were going on with life just as usual. And then God said, bring on the ship, on the boat, all the kinds of animals, 1 pair of every kind of animal. Now, some people have argued that doesn't make any sense. Do you know how many kinds of animals there are on the earth? Well, there are a couple of things with this. First of all, it doesn't say that they were all adults, right? Dinosaurs, adult dinosaurs would be a little bit difficult in any kind of ship. It doesn't say that they're adults. And secondly, it doesn't say, also, the kinds of animals that we have now might have, like the kinds of dogs. How many kinds of dogs do we have? Well, they might have originated from one pair. Even just like people, the different colors of skin and everything, and different shapes of noses and different heights and different, all kinds of things that are different about people, they were all in the genes of one couple. And so depending on where they ended up, then they ended up in different varieties, right? And they also with the dogs and everything else, there weren't as many kinds apparently. So anyway, and this was a big ship. It was a big ship, and he would put on everything. So God said, bring on all the animals. So God brought the animals to him, and they began to load them up. The animals came to them. This is a caricature of the ship. We don't know exactly what it looked like, but you can see that the tar on the outside. And then all the animals came. One pair of every kind of animal. And they loaded them up on the ship. Already, all the food was ready there for the time that they would be on the ark. Now, people around them must have been scratching their heads and saying, what on earth is he thinking? But he told them. And then God said, in a week, I'm going to send rain on the earth. Now, get onto the ship. So they boarded the ship, the boat. And when they had boarded the boat, what happened? God closed the door. There was one door, one ship. Now, I've lived in a number of different countries, even among tribal people. There are stories about this boat. There are varieties in the story. The ones in the Philippines, they talked about two boats, and one of them, they tied them to a tall tree, and that was a mistake because when the floodwaters became too much, then the boat sank. Well, okay, that wasn't exactly the original version, and so because it's gone several thousand years since that time, the story has changed a bit. That tends to happen with people, right? So anyway, but all across the earth, even in mountainous areas, places that floods don't normally come, there are varieties of that same story, a huge flood. Anyway, so they got on the earth, and then God closed the door. A week later, it began to rain. Now, this isn't a normal rain. There are a couple of things with it. It rained for 40 days and 40 nights. I've been in the jungle, and it started to rain, and when it rains hard. In 3 days, there's floods everywhere. Well, not floods to the proportions of this one, but there are floods everywhere. I can't imagine for 40 days and 40 nights. But some people would say, and then it says that the water continued to rise and the boat rose, started floating. It continued to rise until it topped the tops of the mountains to a depth of 15 meters. I think it said 15, or was it 15 cubits? Anyway, very high. Now, if we think about Mount Everest, how high is that? Did it go that much above that height? Okay. That sounds pretty incredible, right? How on earth could it rain that much? Well, that isn't the end of the story. He said, and the water burst forth from underneath. Did you know that there is still today a huge body of water under the ground? Apparently it isn't the way as much as it is now. I mean, there's a lot less now, but at that time there was a huge body of water under the ground. That's where the water was coming up, seeping up to water the ground at that time. Water burst forth from down below. So this isn't just water from rain. Rain would not do it. Rain would not cover the earth. But there was water bursting forth from down below. Now, people on the outside, when it started raining like that, they probably were starting to wonder and getting a little bit nervous about this thing. Well, maybe it's true. Well, perhaps they were calling out, Noah, Noah, we were just joking. Noah, please. Noah, we're your relatives. No, Noah. Too late. God is very patient. 120 years, he said. They saw this ark being built for a very long time. Noah had been warning them. When God closed the door of that ship, there was no more mercy. That was it. Noah and his wife and his 3 sons and their wives, 8 people with all the animals, a pair of every kind, were on the ship. They were safe. But the waters continued to increase until all of the mountaintops were covered. Now, people would say, how is that possible if we look at the size of the mountains these days? Well, there is something that happens when you get that much water coming up and you get the water gone from down below. Well, that dirt that's on top, that crust of the earth, it's got to go somewhere, right? So all kinds of things are happening with that crust of the earth. We see some evidence of this, that there is a ring actually around the earth where it's buckled up in the mid-Atlantic shelf and stuff like that, and then beside it are deep ravines. So we have all these sections. You see mountains where it's just like here in the Faroe Islands, where it's coming up kind of straight on one side, and on the other side it's broken. It's broken. They're shelves on top of one another, and it causes. So it seems like probably what happened. That's what happened, is that's how some of these mountains became so large, and the ravines so deep, and the oceans filled with water. So this is what happened. The waters, all these people outside. Is God compassionate? Yes, he's very compassionate. Is he patient? He's extremely patient, and he's good. But this is one of the qualities of God that has a limit. He has said this is what's going to happen. He gives us a time to repent. He gave Cain an opportunity to repent of his sins, but he didn't do it. And then it was too late. For the people, probably by this time, over 1,500 years had passed from one pair. They increased and increased and increased, and they're living long lives, remember? So probably a lot of people were on the earth by that time, probably millions. Dead. Gone. So with all this turmoil, all this water erupting from down below, and all this, the rain from above, huge amounts of soil and stuff were, and all this vegetation and people and animals were buried very quickly, causing all these fossils that we see these days. And so it turned into coal and turned into all this other stuff. We see evidences of huge trees that turned into coal that were standing straight up, and some sideways. All that was outside, of course, except for like whales and fish and stuff like that, which could survive just fine without being on land. All of that, all of the animals, air-breathing animals, they died. And people, they died. But Noah and his family were safe. It says that after those 40 days, for another 5 months, The water continued to rise until it had covered everything. 5 months. Now, if I continue on to the end of this story of the flood today, it'd probably become a little too long. So we're going to have a little cliffhanger right now and stop right there and see what happened with the rest of the story. Can you imagine, though? Can you imagine all that turmoil, all this eruption and everything? They're floating safe in a huge ship. And now Noah and his family, they had a huge job. You remember, a pair of every kind of animals, and some of those kinds of animals like rabbits are probably increasing very quickly. They're going to have to be taking care of all of these animals. It's not a not a boring job, but probably not a job that I would envy them any either. Can you imagine trying to clean up after the elephants and whatnot? A huge job, a floating zoo. Everyone outside is dead. All their relatives. Everyone that they knew, gone. But Noah and his family were safe. They trusted God. Can you imagine what would happen? What would have happened to Noah and his family if they had said, yeah, God, you're right. This is very wicked, very wicked. We should do something about this. And they didn't build the ark. You think humanity would have survived? Well, faith requires action. They believed God, so they did what he said. And they were saved. They were saved from the earth. They were safe. Just like anybody. God doesn't give lots of options. He says, this is the plan. This is how you're going to be saved. We can't come with just our own thoughts in mind like Cain did and was not accepted. We have to come to him in his way. He provided one ark, one door. Come in here or be stuck outside. If you're stuck outside, that's the end of you. Lots of opportunity to change our mind, to agree with him and be saved. But if we don't, that's the end. Like all those people outside. I can think of a lot of people who swum great distances. Sigmund, is that what the name of the one that swam from one island to another, to Suðuroy? Yeah, there are lots of stories about people doing amazing things, but it was a total of a year that they were floating. Nobody survives that without food and water and everything else. They might have been holding on to tree trunks for a while. All died that were outside of the ark. Not that God wanted that. God had given them opportunity. God had given them a way of salvation, but they didn't accept it. So there it is. Floating. That's where I'm going to leave you for now.